Hey guys, how's it going? This is Dilmer again and welcome back to my channel. So I want to talk to you about prototyping and what are some of the prototyping areas that I use to actually create prototypes for my games, prototypes for the applications that I'm creating. So every time you start to prototype something, I would recommend that you start with three areas, and the first area is basically paper prototyping. So for paper prototyping, we basically start very simple. We might need to prototype a user interface, and what I do is I just grab a piece of paper and I start actually drawing the interface. I put the buttons on the interface and the different controls that I think should be in the interface to give the user the best experience. And if I'm prototyping a gameplay, I might actually draw a level, and I might draw some of the obstacles that I want to have in the level. So whenever you're prototyping, try not to start with the game engine or the actual code that you're going to be delivering for your users. Try to step back and actually draw it and prototype it, and don't make it too complicated. This needs to be very, very simple. And some of the other things that I've done in the past is I actually draw a user interface on a piece of paper and I show it to a friend. I show it to somebody that I knew, and I ask for their opinion and their feedback. And it's much easier to make changes on a piece of paper than it is to actually make a change on a final and polished game. So make sure that you do that. Start with paper prototyping. And the next area that I also really, really enjoy doing is digital prototyping. So I told you there were three areas. Digital prototyping to me is actually broken down into two areas. And digital prototyping is basically when you're using a digital tool such as Photoshop or Adobe tools for prototyping, Adobe XD. So if you ever wonder how you would prototype digitally before actually prototyping in the tool that you're gonna use to build your game, to create your application, is use some of these tools so I use Photoshop in my games. I also use Adobe XD for some of the UI components because it really allows you to test how the user interface is gonna be presented to the user. Maybe you have too many, you're going too deep into the user interface, meaning that there are too many entry points and users are leaving too quick. So for more of the game side of things, like the gameplay, I actually like to do things in Photoshop before I actually go into the game engine. I might prototype a level, and if I'm doing a 2D game, I might have 2D sprites that I can basically just layer on top of a Photoshop, and I can move things around pretty quickly. I also use Photoshop for deciding what the aesthetics of the game should be. I personally really like black and white and dark color games, and I don't really like very bright colors. So I try to use Photoshop for a lot of that, where I design a level in Unity, and then I move that level back into Photoshop by just taking a screenshot. And then in Photoshop, I basically just changed the exposure, the brightness, the curvature of the colors in the scene. So Photoshop allows me to do a lot of that. And going back to digital prototyping, as I was discussing, if you're using a tool like Photoshop or Adobe XD, make sure that you go through different iterations and create prototypes until you're pretty happy with the aesthetics, until you're pretty happy with the gameplay. And if you have paper prototyping, and now you're gonna say, okay, Dilmer, I did paper prototyping, I need to do digital prototyping, and then when am I gonna be creating the game? And that is a good question. The reason why I go through that process, and it might seem cumbersome for some of you, and you might say, well, this is extra work. At the end of the day, it's actually not extra work. It's gonna really save you a lot of time. So let me give you a realistic example. When I work on my first game, which is a Stickman World, I didn't do paper prototyping, I didn't do digital prototyping, and I actually jumped into the game. So I was moving sprites, creating game objects, I was moving everything manually. And I created 10 levels, and then I didn't really like how something looked by the time that I got to level 10. I found that I really wanted to change the look and feel, so I had to go back through and modify all the 10 levels. So imagine that you have 60 levels and you really haven't decided on the aesthetics of the game, or of the UX, the user experience. Then it's gonna take you more time to do in the game than it will take you to actually do in a tool like Photoshop, or a tool like Adobe XD, or even doing digital prototyping in a prototype scene in Unity will help you. And the reason for that is because we will be able to answer so many questions throughout that process before you actually start working on the game. So make sure that you follow those basically three areas. The first one was paper prototyping is very, very important. The second one was using digital prototyping from a Photoshop standpoint, or actually using prototyping in the game engine with the prototyping scene. So do that. It's really, really helpful. It really has worked for me. And if you have any questions, let me know through the comments, let me know through Twitter. And thank you again, guys. Don't forget to share, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you, guys.